Good to see everybody. So I know what all of you are thinking. We are not going to discuss the midterm today. We want to utilize most of our time for Rachel, our guest speaker. But I do want to give a quick shout out to Andre and Luis, who both got 100% on the midterm. Congratulations, guys. That was pretty impressive. So I'm also aware that Schoology was acting up last week for some of you. I did see your emails. I will, go back and be mindful of that as I grade later on this week. But I just want to let you know that I did see that. So if you submitted a deliverable late last week, I know that Schoology was acting up quite a bit. So I'll be sure to be mindful of that as I grade and consider that as well. Thank you for letting me know. And then for the two of you who had reached out to say that they didn't get a chance to do the midterm because something had gone south on Schoology, I did open the midterm back up for you between now and 11:59 p.m. tonight. So you can please go in and do that for the two of you. I believe it was Precious and Hannah. So you guys can go ahead and take it since you weren't able to do it. So, all right. So that's that. We'll talk more midterm tomorrow as we get into the rest of the class. But I want to allocate as much time as possible to my friend Rachel. Rachel, thanks for being here today.
I'm delighted to be here. Great to meet you all.
Yeah, we are so glad. So, Rachel, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Rachel Horan. Lovely to meet you. I am Irish. I've been living here in New York for the last 10 years. And I know Eric through another job where I'm an executive coach, and I also do a lot of professional development and training work in corporate environments. And so Eric and I have done a lot of that together. In fact, Eric and I certified together, and I have to say, when I met him, I was like, oh man, he's the real deal, right? He was so great. And in fact, one of the first things we did as we were training together was he taught a class on influencing, which just had us all howling with laughter and so impressed. So it's a funny situation to be back around here talking influence in front of Eric. I'll do my best.
Well, one thing I will say, and I mean, all of you know this, is that I'm not really one to hype people up, but I really and truly believe this. I said this to you all last week that Rachel is one of the greatest, communicators, facilitators that I've ever known. So I'm excited. I have my notebook and my pen in front of me because I'm excited to learn just as much as all of you are. And she was very generous to donate her time this morning to all of us to give us this seminar and give us this workshop. So, Rachel, can you tell us, this is a very typical Europe question. What is a fun fact about you? Something interesting or unique? And I'm sure you have lots of them.
Oh, you do me a great credit. In fact, that is the kind of question that makes me absolutely squirm, because as soon as people say that, I think, oh, there's nothing fun about me ever in the history of my life. I suppose I came to New York for 2 or 3 years. That was my plan, and a decade has passed, and it just kind of got in under our skin, and we got stuck. I used to be able to speak 4 languages. I've forgotten most of 3 of them, and I'm left with just English. So what can I tell you? I love to talk.
Uh, Talking all sorts of languages, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep,
now we're
absolutely.
all curious. What were the 4 languages?
So I speak English as a first language. Irish was my second language. Irish is a completely different language that we speak in Ireland, and then I also learned German and French, which
Wow.
I loved. But I was fluent in all 4 at one point, but no more.
Yeah,
Brain
yeah.
kills what it doesn't need.
Absolutely. And languages are one of those things for all of us who have studied. We know it doesn't take long to forget.
Yeah.
My senior year of high school, I could speak French pretty well. And now I basically know how to ask for the bathroom, and that's about all I remember.
I bet you can ask for beers too.
Maybe if I ever needed to, for sure. Rachel knows me so well. All right. So with that being said, we want to give our full attention to Rachel. We want to make sure that we ask questions. We can go in the chat box. She wants this to be an interactive time. She's a tremendous resource. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. Let's give a round of applause to Rachel Horan.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to meet you all. So it's great to see all your faces. And I just So what I have for you is some material around influencing and persuading. I started my career at the BBC in London. I went in as like a sound engineer, a trainee sound engineer, ended up producing radio shows there, moved back to Dublin, my hometown, where I got into political communication. And then when I couldn't bear the politics any longer, I decided to specialize in marketing and communication for arts and entertainment venues. So in all of those roles, being able to influence people is crucial. And now I work as a trainer and facilitator in lots of different industries. People really want to know that I've worked in their industry before. You know, have you worked in financial services? Have you worked in pharmaceuticals? And I'm lucky enough that at this point I've got experience training in all those areas, but actually it doesn't really matter, because wherever you go, you're dealing with the people, and the people and their psychology is what shows up. And so today we're really thinking about people and psychology. When I was working in politics, I found that on any given day, I might be dealing with the politicians themselves, or their staff who believed that they were the gatekeepers, or party members who believed that they actually owned the party, or the political correspondents and the journalists who believed that they owned the story. And what I found very quickly was that if I tried to approach all of them in the same way, it just wasn't working. I needed different ways to influence and persuade different people to convince them of the kinds of things I was trying to say. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, is like there are different ways to do this, and we forget these things that we knew instinctively at the age of about 7. And I tell you that because, has anybody here, by a show of hands up, if you ever tried to convince your parents to let you get a pet? Right. Okay, that's great. And so you know what I'm talking about, right? You tried a lot of different tactics, and you were persistent. And we're going to look at that, what you knew when you were 7 that you're not perhaps giving yourself credit for anymore. And how can we take those innate learnings and then add some more stuff into the pot to make us more effective as we want to influence people going into the future. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, pop into the chat box anybody that you would like to be able to influence and why, right? So I'm wondering about, who are those people we're trying to influence? Is it our work colleagues? Is it customers? Is it roommates? What are you trying to get them to do for you? Right, so begging does not help. Well, we're going to talk about that, Manny, right? In terms of, I'm assuming you're thinking in terms of the pets. We'll see about that. So trying to get influence our moms, that can be the hardest one of all. Interviewers, employers, absolutely. Significant other, right, again, can be tricky. The people we know really well, it can be tricky to figure out how to do that. Colleagues and managers. Your parents, absolutely. Younger generations, okay, brilliant. Ashley, just yourself, great. Convincing yourself that you've got some stuff going on, you're able for this. And what are you trying to influence them to do? What is it that you want them to agree with or allow you, or in what way are you trying to convince them? So customers, Soraya, are you trying to get them to buy stuff from you or buy more stuff? Give you money? Absolutely. Convince them that it benefits both of us, right? Shells, I like that. That's great. And improve my pay? Absolutely. So lots of different things on our agenda there. These are all really worthy topics. These are all really important. And so that's what we want to be thinking about as we go through this. The governor and the mayor to keep the gyms open, right? David, I like it. I like that you're aiming high, right? In fact, keep the gyms open, and then the gym members to keep their masks on, right? So we'll go that far. Excellent. So you've already got some backers there. Ashley's on your case. So tell me this, who do you know, either individually, like personally know, or know by reputation, that you think is a good influencer, and why, right? So who do we recognize as being really good influencers? And what is it about them that makes you think, oh, that? The Jenners. Okay, Randy, you're going to have to back that up with some information. MLK, I'm going to assume that we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. And yes, absolutely, his influence stretched not just only in his own lifetime, but so far beyond. Steve Jobs was a great influencer, absolutely. Beyonce, okay, any celebrity, Moises. Your older brothers, David, give me more backup, right? Why? I want to know what makes them more effective. Dondre, you are very good at influencing your little sister. Again, need to know why. People trying to sell you the self-help books, right? Even those webinars now on Facebook and Instagram, all that, like when they can keep you watching for 17 minutes because you keep thinking they're going to give you the answer in the next 30 seconds. And then it turns out you have to buy. Ashley, I see you nodding. You've fallen victim to those 15 lost minutes too. Absolutely. Steve Jobs convinced anyone to join his team or build his product he could, influencing me to strive higher and keep going. Brilliant. Gandhi, absolutely. And again, his is a mixed story, right? There were different stages in his life where he was more and less influential. He wasn't always the great influencer that we think of him in his later life. Dondre, right? You're using that influence to get her to wash the dishes. The poor girl. I hope she gets you to dry them. Celebrities are more effective because they have a broader audience who want to hear what they think. Right? Interesting. And how are they targeting that audience, and where is that coming from? These are some of the qualities we want to think about. Therapists try to influence you to change your perception. They do, Charles, but again, thinking about what are the tactics, what are they using? So fantastic. I'm going to share, hopefully this will let me. I've got some slides, right? And I hope now that you can see these slides. What I hate about this is now I've lost all your great faces. But what we want to think as we're going through about having influence. So what do we mean exactly? Oh, now my rocker. We're going to be thinking about exactly what we mean by influence, what we notice about those great influencers, whether it was Gandhi, Martin Luther King, our parents, our therapists. We're going to think about this main tactics around think, feel, do. Then some more tactics that I have for you. And then what are we going to do with this going forward? So let's start here. What I mean by influence is causing someone to think, feel, or do something that you want them to think, feel, or do. So in the case of the Jenners, right, they want me to think this product can change my life. They want me to feel a hunger for it. And what they want me to do is hand over some cold hard cash. Right? Dondre is probably making his sister think that somehow she's doing him a favor. He'll owe her. Feel like she would have one up over him, or feel like maybe she's so important and so capable, and that she could really take care of the dishes in this way, and then do the dishes, right? So thinking that piece through, what are we aiming for on that one? I've just realized I've lost our chat box. So let me just pull that up here. Why is it not letting me see that? What am I doing? Eric, how do I open the chat
I
box
know it can be a little bit wonky.
while I'm
Do
sharing?
you want me to read the question that someone posed?
Oh, if there's a question, yes, please.
Yes, Ashley Ross asks, to me, convincing someone is not about getting someone to change their mind, but rather having them consider your viewpoint. Is this idea like the current slide in different words?
I don't think so. I think sorry, whose question was that, Eric?
That was Ashley Ross.
Ashley, I don't think that's quite the same, Ashley, because what you're doing is influencing them to also think about your perspective, right? So what you're doing, perhaps here you're getting them to think this is worth considering. You're getting them to feel Ashley poses good ideas. I should think this through. Like I feel respect for Ashley. What you want them to do is think. So it would be that to an extent if all you want them to do is consider your perspective. But actually, when you want them to do something else, like give you the pay rise, like do more than, you know, 1/3 of the project that we're supposed to be doing 50-50, do their piece of the homework on time, um, give you Saturday off work. They're actually trying to push them into more, to more than just consider your perspective. We actually want them to go further. Does that help, Ashley? Let me know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does, but I also have a follow-up question, if I
Mm,
may.
sure.
Those sound like tangible benefits. Does this also work for intangible benefits also?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on what the do is. What are we trying to influence them to do? So, uh, in turn, like if the do is a benefit to them, I want you to have a more healthy lifestyle, right? So I want you to do something. I want you to go running, or I want you to pray more, or I want you to save more money. These are all things I want them to do. So it is intangible to me in terms of it's not going to affect my life, perhaps, but it's tangible for them. I think I've dodged your question, Ashley, completely on that one, actually.
No, you answered it.
All right. Okay. Um, so, as we start to think then about people who are great influencers, one of the things that we notice about them is that they use scale, right? So, the first piece of this scale idea is that they are strategic. And again, thinking about when you were trying to convince your parents to get that pet, right? You were highly strategic. You were walking home from school, you had a whole speech in your head about the puppy. You walked into the kitchen, you took one look at your mom's face and you went, oh, not now, right? So, first of all, you're strategic. You pick your moment. You think about, why is this an appropriate moment that I could be able to turn somebody's attention here, turn their mind. The other piece is that you think through, how am I going to do this? Really powerful influencers don't just say the first thing that comes off the top of their head. They've got tactics. We're going to talk about the tactics as we go through, but they are very deliberate in how they're doing this, right? And we're talking about intentional influencing here. We're not talking about you're leading a good model life and people want to be like you. We're talking about when you're trying to convince people to think or feel or do something you want them to think or feel or do. So that's the S in the scale. The second piece is that they are confident. And this is the one that can be really hard for us, right? To feel confident about how we make this request, how we approach it. Couple of really easy things. One, you want to look confident, right? And so if you are going to be influencing and you're just a tiny head in a tiny box on a tiny screen, 2 miles or 1,000 miles from somebody else, let's give ourselves the best chance. Let's make sure that the camera's at eye height. It's not like on a laptop where you're staring up my nose. It's not actually looking over my shoulder. And then you're going to look at the camera, right? Because people want that eye contact. That eye contact is going to matter. We're going to use their names. Like I can see Manny and David nodding at me here. Randy's taking it in more slowly. He's not quite sure yet. He's making sure, but he's got a great big smile, right? So again, thinking through about what are those really simple things we can use to exude our confidence and make sure that we're connecting with the people who we're speaking to. The other thing is to remember that our brains have what are called mirror neurons. And these are the little neurons in our brain that make feeling and emotion contagious. So, when somebody is starting to tell you a joke and they crack up laughing before they've even got to the punchline, and suddenly you're laughing too, and you're like, I don't know why I'm laughing. I didn't even hear this joke. That is the mirror neurons. It's the way feelings are contagious. We also experience this when you're having a perfectly nice time, in good form. Somebody comes stomping into your house or stomping into your meeting and slams down something on the table, and suddenly everybody's on edge and everybody's cranky. So, thinking about those mirror neurons and using that confidence, how am I feeling about whatever it is I'm trying to convince you? What's the emotion that I'm conveying to you? If I'm trying to convince you this is exciting and I'm making it sound like, it's just another Tuesday of Zoom meetings and, after Tuesday, there'll be Wednesday, not very convincing. So, what's the kind of energy? What's the emotion? What are you conveying? What's that confidence that you bring? If you're really trying to convince me to buy something from you, buy an idea from you, a product, give you something, give you permission, you're going to have to persuade me. And the first piece of that is the confidence and the assuredness that you have and you give over to me. And then the third big thing, and we really forget this, is that you are already far more persuasive than you give yourself credit for. And there's a researcher called Vanessa Bones, a professor at Cornell University, and she and her colleague Professor Flynn, have done dozens of studies. And what they've discovered is that people persistently underestimate how influential they are. And so they ran an experiment where they asked people to walk out into the street and randomly get somebody to agree to do a questionnaire, to give money to a charity, or to let them borrow their cell phone, right? And they got people to predict how likely were they to be able to convince somebody to do these things. And then they sent them out. And it turned out people were twice as likely to be successful as they expected. Twice as likely. So we need to remember we're already better at this than we think we are. But what we need to do is we need to ask, right? So we've got to be asking that question. If we are not making that direct ask, if we're not clear, if we hold ourselves back, of course we're not going to get the promotion. Of course we're not going to get the loan. Of course we're not going to get the sale, right? So it's knowing the value of that simple, direct ask and the power that can have. We know that social pressure already kind of convinces us we should say yes. So just make sure that you're using all those goodies that are going for you. People are far more likely to say yes than no. Eric, I'm aware that I've lost the chat box. So will you let me know if it's just...
I will do. There's no questions at this time, but
Okay.
I'll let you know when one pops up.
Okay. And it says if I do Alt-H. No, that's still not opening it. All right. So those are the first three: strategic, confident, asking. You also, really great influencers are powerful listeners. They really listen to what other people are saying. If you think about Martin Luther King, Gandhi, those big names that we had on the list, the Obamas usually come up, right? Both Michelle and Barack. Oprah, she always comes up on these lists. Who are great influencers? They really listen to what the other person is saying. And they really listen to understand, where is this person coming from? What are they exactly objecting to? What's the issue? I hear them saying one thing, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that's the problem. I think they're not really telling me what the problem is, that it's actually something else. And when we think about listening and we think about trying to convince people, those two things oftentimes don't go together, because there are different stages of listening. I'm sure you've come across these before, right? From ignoring to pretending to listen to selective listening and only tuning into what you're saying, to then much more attentive listening, and then active listening. When I'm really engaged, I'm listening not just to your words, but also to your tone and what's going on around it. Again, think of yourself when you were trying to get that pet. Like every time your parents said no, you were listening to what they said so that you could come back with the counter argument. You could figure out, right? Okay, the issue is there's going to be like too much mess. And then you were coming back saying, but I can handle that. And Caroline and I, my sister and I, we're going to take care of all the mess. Don't you worry. Right? So thinking about the way we do that thinking. But what is it that stops us listening when we're trying to convince people, right? So this is a chat box question. When you're trying to convince somebody, as you look at this now, what, if anything, inhibits your listening? Give me your answers in the chat box. And I'm going to see if it pops up. Because we know there's a lot going on in these interactions, and something can get in the way and stop us listening to the other person. when we realize, looking at it with a cold eye, it's obvious that that's what we need to be doing. Any thoughts on that one?
Do we read them off to you, Rachel?
Yeah, please, or a selection of them.
Of course, we got frustration, phone calls, just trying to get my point across, adjusting accordingly, no eye contact, lack of interest, sleepiness, being self-conscious, what is cold eye, outside conversations, headache, I don't care, not keeping an open mind, having a fake smile, others speaking, being lackadaisical and getting distracted, or body language and gestures all get in the way.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so what I'm hearing is sort of two big buckets and a question. So a cold eye is a phrase, and maybe it's an Irish phrase, which is, it means like, when I look at this cleanly, objectively, and not from inside my own self, which I suppose is a warm eye, but I've never considered that before. So maybe that's where that phrase comes from. So what I'm hearing is there's two big buckets. One is external distraction, which is the emails and the phones going and the hand gestures and the whatever else is happening that is distracting me externally. And then I'm also hearing about a lot of internal distractions. Too busy trying to get my point across, too busy figuring out what to say next, waiting for my turn to talk, being self-conscious, right? That there's an internal commentary. There's also, I already know what they're going to say, right? So I've assumed I've got this, or I'm just waiting for them to shush so that I can have my turn to speak. Or I don't care enough about what they're saying, or I'm rushing, I'm trying to get to that piece. For all of these internal distractions, our number one tactic is going to be to use more curiosity, right? To really listen, not to respond, but to listen to understand. What's going on with them? Because most conversations end up, I do some talking, and then I shush, and you do some talking, and then you shush, and I go again. And very often I can end up just waiting for your turn to be over so that I can continue saying the things I want to keep saying. And I'm not actually listening to you. Sometimes what I'm doing is, while you're talking, I'm still listening to me, because I'm composing the next thing I'm going to be saying, right? All about why you're still wrong. And I'm doing all that in my head. And in the meantime, I've missed actually the nuance or the gap or the something else that you mentioned. Now, in terms of the external distractions, they are hard to control, particularly if they're distracting us or the person we're trying to influence. So again, that's why being strategic about your timing, right? It can be a good moment to make sure that you can get their focus on you, so that they're not quite so distracted. And also thinking about your own self. How much do you care about this? How much do you want to convince them? In which case, if you know that your phone is going to distract you or your computer is going to distract you, close it, turn it over, put it away. This is your main job. If you want to be able to convince people, like an Oprah, like an MLK, like Donde with his sister, right? You're going to need to do just this one thing. Do just this one thing at a time for that moment. And you've got to think about why that's going to be important. We can be listening to paraphrase, to say back to them, okay, so if I'm hearing you right, the issue is this. And I'm like, well, it's not really that. It's kind of like that and this other thing. Now you're going to be knowing. Now you're going to be knowing, where's the gap in the door? Where's the gap in the door? Because what you want to do is find where's that gap so that you can push it all the way open. And there's a researcher who reckons that the best word to listen for is decided. Because when people have decided to do something, they haven't done it yet. So if they say, well, we decided to do blah, 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 then there's your gap in the door. You decided to go for Mexican food, but you haven't gone yet. So I could still convince you to come for Thai, right? So thinking about where's the gap in the door. So what are we listening for? We're listening to understand what their objections are, where they're coming from, what matters to them. And that is the final thing that we're looking for. People who have scale, so we're strategic, confident, they're going to ask, they're going to listen, and they are also going to have empathy. because what we really need to know is what matters to the person that we're trying to influence. What do they care about? What do they care about? What do they feel in this moment? What do they feel about you? What do they feel about your argument? And what are they feeling? If they're tired or bored or frustrated or stressed out, what's their scope and how can you use that, which I know sounds mean, but it doesn't have to. You can use that as a way to help them depending on what you're trying to influence them about. But thinking about what are they feeling and what's going on with them in this moment, that's going to help you form your arguments. So if you're asking your boss for a raise, but with your empathy, you start to understand she's worried about making the rent this month, right? My boss is not sure that she's going to be able to make payroll. If you have that empathy, then you can start to figure out how you can structure that request, that persuasion around a pay rise. And it may be that you can structure that you can do more shifts, or you can do more hours, you can take on another project, and that would make it worth her while to give you that pay rise. So thinking that piece through, what are they thinking or feeling? And that can be really hard, because when I really want to convince somebody, I'm usually quite involved with myself and sure and very aware of what I'm feeling, whether that's that I'm angry or I'm frustrated or I'm eager for this, right? And I want to move forward. So it can be hard to have this piece of empathy for the other person. So those are the first 5 things that we want to do. We want to know that we're going to be strategic, that we are already more persuasive than we think, but we do need to ask, we need to make it plain, we need to listen to them, and we need to have a sense of where are they coming from and what's in it for them. And when we put all of this together, then we get to that point where the number one thing we want to do is think about what's the result I'm looking for here. What am I actually looking for? Do I want you to lend me $10? If that's what I want, then so that's the do. What do I need you to think or feel? And so think, feel, do is the whole essence of influencing or persuading someone. What do you want them to do after you finish talking to them? So I might want my boss to let me do this piece of work in a different way. In not the way that he is expecting, in not the way that everybody's done it until now. I'm new here. Let me do it a different way. I've got a different idea. What am I going to need that boss to think or to feel in order to let me do it a different way? So in the chat box, I want you to give me either a think or a feel. What are we thinking? What are we hoping to make this boss? I'm going to call him Kevin. What do you want Kevin to think or feel in order to let us do this piece of work in a novel way?
So it looks like some of the responses, he can trust me. He is interested, that you are reliable, that I'm reliable. Kevin should feel it benefits the job, feel confident you can do the work efficiently. There's also a benefit to him, that I'm qualified. I want the boss to feel like the office floor needs an espresso machine. Think about that was a scenario that we did a few weeks ago. Think about how the work will come out better, that I'm valuable, that I know what I'm talking about. I want him to feel like I can be an aspect. I want him to think I'm the best person for the job. The interest and benefits for him and other employees.
Okay, brilliant. Great range of stuff, right? So there's lots of thoughts and lots of feelings. And what we're trying to do is pair them up. So if what I want him to think is, I can trust Precious, or I can trust Andre, right? So I want him to think that. What do I need him to feel? I need him to feel assured. I need him to feel confidence. If I want him to think, Ashley has a good idea, or I want him to think Manny knows what he's talking about, or I want him to think Soraya has been studying this. So then I want him to feel I can trust Soraya, right? Because when I figured out that think, feel, do, right? Then I can start to structure my arguments around what is it that I need to say to persuade that's going to be most effective. And oftentimes we sort of lump all that together. I want them to think it's a good idea and feel it's a good idea, and let me do my good idea. Now we're operating on too few. We haven't pulled enough levers because we can get it. I want them to think it's a good idea, and I want them to feel excited. Or I want them to think it's a good idea and feel impatient to get started, right? There's all sorts of ways that I can maneuver those around. Is that making sense? Give me a thumbs up if you're following me now. Yep. Okay. I'm seeing some of those. And so let's go back to the coffee machine. I want the boss. What was the story, Eric? You want the boss to put in a coffee machine?
The story is that you're working on a as a trader. You can't leave your desk, and you want an espresso machine on your floor as opposed to going to the 7th floor because that chews up valuable time.
Okay.
Anything the company should pay for the espresso machine for you and your fellow traders.
Okay. So now that I want the coffee machine, what do I need the boss to think, and what do I need him to feel? Into the chat box, because they might be two different things. Now, Eric has given us some background about chewing up time. There's a group of people. There's multiple benefits. I see Jesus is typing away. There's some good ideas coming. What are we thinking, Eric?
Yeah, we put. I think going upstairs is a waste of time.
Yes.
They'll work harder and make more money if if they have the espresso machine on their floor.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth the cost and feels a necessity.
Okay.
They think they'll be efficient. They'll manage their time better. How much time will be consumed if we don't have it on our floor?
Great. Okay, so those are all
Mm-hmm.
Those are all great thoughts. Those are all things I want the boss to think. Who's coming in with a feeling?
Let's see here. A feeling. I don't see any feelings yet.
All right, guys. What do we want the boss to feel? Because those are great thoughts. Thinking that this will be more time.
There we go. Yoel came in with, I feel compassionate.
Nice, right?
Awesome.
Excellent. I feel compassion. I feel compassion. These poor people. I feel like they're worked to the bone. I feel responsible. Mm-hmm. I feel like I can be magnanimous, right? I can do a reward. I feel proud. Mm-hmm. I feel generous. I feel compelled. I feel like this is urgent. These are all different feelings. And you can start to see that now we've got multiple things we're trying to hit them with. So it's not just the same track. We're not just appealing to their mind. We might want them to feel a bit of an ego stroke, like you'd be the best boss ever. Everybody would love you. Everybody would be so grateful. Maybe we want him or her to feel sort of like they're being really gracious, right? That they'll be well loved. I feel like I could be part of the team. So lots of different ways to come at this. And that's always going to be the first part of the think, feel, do. So that's where we need to start. What are we trying to get out of this conversation? And then we're going to need to use some different tactics, right? So I've got a series of tactics here. You know these, right? You've been using these since you were in the 2nd grade. Probably earlier, actually. The first one is thinking about, so what are we going to say? How are we going to actually get this going? Tactic number 1 is the one we use all the time. Reason. Because, right? You need to give us a coffee machine because we're wasting time in the elevators, because everybody's working so hard, because we like coffee, right? Reason is an absolute gift. We use it all the time. It is probably the most effective. It's certainly the most common influencing tactic. Where it falls down is when you try to convince me and you tell me your reasons, right? What I'm interested in is, what's the reason for me to do this? What are the reasons for me to give you a coffee machine? Now, we hit on a few of them, right? Because the team will be more time efficient. I'm going to get more work out of them. That I care about. That's a reason for me. Because you like coffee, that's a reason for you. That's less interesting to me. So finding out what are their reasons to do it. So perhaps in a moment now, Eric, let's go into some breakout rooms in threes or fours, whatever works for you.
Sure. I can go ahead and get those arranged and let me know I should send them off.
So really thinking about what are their reasons. So I'm going to give you a scenario, right? You are working on a collaborative project with a team of people at work. And one person is going to get to present this work to the boss and a group of senior executives. And I want you to come up with reasons why the other people in the team, so we put you into threes or fours, why should the other people let you do the presentation? Okay? So I want you to come up with reasons. Now we're thinking about the reasons for them. So you're selling it to them. What are the reasons they would want you to be the presenter? That making sense? So I'm going to give, okay, so we're going to give you just 3 minutes to think through this one. So Eric, you can send them out.
All right, off you go.
I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
When you say they, are you talking about your colleagues or the people you're presenting to?
Your colleagues.
Okay. All right.
Thank
you.
Hey, Ashley, Andre, and Christian, are you guys able to go to your rooms? Ashley, Andre, you guys there? By the way, Rachel, this other person, Kachun, are you there, Kachun?
I'm here.
Hey, Kachun is one of my colleagues. He wanted to come in and observe.
Hi, Kachun. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
How are you doing, Kachun?
I'm doing well. Preparing for, listening to this and prepared for my next class.
Of course. Awesome.
I have them right after you.
Oh, you do? Okay, great. Looks like room 11 is asking for help, so I'm gonna go in there and see what they need. Are you good, Rachel?
Yep, I'm fine.
All right. Also, Rachel, I found this really strange workaround with Zoom when you're sharing your screen.
Yeah.
If you press the the share screen button at the top, does the chat box show up then?
So the chat box has popped up now. When everybody went out to the breakout rooms, the chat box popped up.
Oh, weird.
So it's interesting. I'll see if it disappears when they all come back.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little workaround that might be helpful, but it looks like I got another room paging me, so I'm gonna go check on them and then I'll come back.
Okay, we better bring them back.
All right, I'm bringing them back right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So,
Not everyone's back yet, Rachel.
oh,
I'm sorry.
they're on their way.
It takes
That's
about a
all right.
minute.
Yeah,
You know how these things are.
they're big. Absolutely,
It's a long walk back to the main room.
it is.
By the way, Luis, now that you're in class, congratulations on being the one of two students who got 100% on the midterm. Good for you.
Thank you.
All right. So, is it looking like most of us are back, Eric, or are they still
We still got
debating?
about 15 more seconds.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yep. So they're coming. So we're about half of us are back already.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and get started. They'll be back in 5 seconds.
So, tell me, hands up anybody who thought that they came up with a good reason why the team member should let them do the presentation. Who wants to volunteer? Who's there? Amina, did you put your hand up? No?
No, I just waved hi to everyone because my hand.
Okay, well, you would have bought it at the auction, Amina. So what about in your room, Amina? Did anybody there have a good reason why we should let them do the presentation?
Well, yeah, one of my colleagues, she mentioned that you should look at the type of personality a person has and what they need to present. Like if someone's always funny and cracking jokes, you shouldn't pick them to present in front of someone who's actually always serious.
Nice.
Should
All
match
right.
Personalities with the presenter and the audience.
Right. So you should let me do it because I am much more serious and less charming. So that would be a much better idea than having, Alexander or Andre do it because they're so charming. We definitely don't want to let them be uber charming and funny, and then we're going to not get the right mix. Brilliant. I love that. Anybody else? Thank you, Amina, for playing the game. Majida, tell me how to say your name first.
Majida.
Majida, I apologize. What were you thinking in your room?
So we said that we came to the conclusion that it would be me presenting it because first it would be me because I've done previous presentations and I presented my ideas as a group, taking a leadership role and presented other people's ideas to others. That's the first thing. The second thing is my next steps would be taking information from both my other two colleagues and making sure whatever their reasons are, incorporate them within the reason that I'll be presenting to the boss to make sure all three of our ideas get through to him. And on another note, if a presentation is required, I would make a third PowerPoint presentation and present it to him, or prepare an elevator pitch that would be given to him during either while going up and down the elevator, or if I ever meet him in whatever scenario. And then of course that would also mean setting the tone and the type of feelings that I need to portray. So my tone would be different depending on either his mood or how his day is going or the type of person he is, or the usage of words that I'll be using will be different depending on, again, the tone and the overall setting.
Brilliant work. Brilliant. So I'm just going to make sure that the way you were presenting that, I'm just going to paraphrase here for time. I'm assuming that you were telling the others, you should let me present because you want this presentation to go extremely well. And you need somebody who's got experience doing this before. You want somebody who knows what they're doing. And I've got that kind of experience, right? So number one reason, they want somebody who knows what they're doing. Number two reason, you're going to want somebody doing this presentation who can bring all the voices from the room, can bring all of our ideas together. And I'm going to be able to collate those ideas in. But again, making sure that I'm bringing their reasons, right? So I'm not just saying I can do this, but I'm saying here's what you want and I can do that, right? And that third one was you're going to want somebody who can really match their tone and be very sensitive to the mood that our boss is in, right? And you know me, you know the way I can do that. So again, we're finding their reasons and how we match that, right? You see how they're doing that? Very nice work. Very nice work. It can be really hard to come up with their reasons and not mine because I get distracted by my own reasons. So that's tactic number one, but I've got 3 more to share with you. So that's just the first tactic. The next one is inspire. Now, inspire does feel like it's a kind of a Gandhi, Martin Luther King tactic. And it feels like, well, where's the space for inspire in, 20th century corporate America? There's loads. There's loads. And it comes back to that mirror neuron thing. Bless you, Tyrell. It comes back to the mirror neurons around how do you want people to feel? Because if you want them to feel bored and frustrated and fed up, that's just, you know, that's lots of days. That's lots of people can do that. But what you want them to feel is that there is some brightness, there is some reason to be hopeful, there's some good thing that's coming. We often use inspire when what we're describing is going to be uncomfortable, right? So Eric probably said to you, imagine what it's going to be like the week before Thanksgiving. You will already have done your midterms. You'll have no more study. It'll all be out of the way. It'll be terrific. You're going to be so happy that you got your midterms over if you work hard for them. And imagine how good you're going to feel as you stand there with that graded paper, knowing how well you've done. What he didn't talk to you about was how hard you were going to have to work and the study and all the last 3 weeks of cramming that you've been doing to get everything done and get your projects finished and whatever else he had. He didn't talk to you about the hard work bit, because when we're inspiring, we paint that beautiful image of where we're going to get to. So imagine if we never had to do this particular piece of work by hand, this manual work again. Right? Wouldn't it be so terrific when this happens? What I'm not going to say is, okay, you sit and train the algorithm for 3 months. I'm only going to talk about when the AI can do it all by itself. So that piece around inspire, thinking about how we're making people feel, and then pointing towards that. So skipping over that ugly journey and pointing to that beautiful end place, that's inspire. Again, I'm thinking back to Dondre's poor sister when he says, you know, imagine, you started it, man. I don't know why you're looking embarrassed now. When you can sit down and it's all done and put away and it's all, the kitchen's going to look so tidy and mom's going to be so pleased, and right? You don't talk about how long it's going to take her. Right? So we can use inspire way more than we think we do. Number 3, so Eric, you use that one absolutely. How much
Always.
we'll enjoy a clean apartment, a tidy bedroom, how much the dog will love you when he's been walked, right? Number 3 tactics, we've got reason, inspire. Number 3 is actually 2 things. It's deal or favor. Because basically deals and favors are the same, except in a favor, I don't quite give you the second bit yet, but we both know that I owe you, right? So a deal is totally straightforward, okay? You help me on this project, I'll help you out the next time. You let me use your printer, I'll go get you a coffee, right? We know how quick those are. The favor, can you do me a favor? Can I use your printer? We both know you owe me, and not in a mean way, but in a very human way, because as humans, we have this deep need for balance. So when somebody gives you a compliment, you give them a compliment back, right? You think about that. When someone buys you a coffee, the next time you go out, you try to buy them a coffee. That's just the way it goes. There's just that balance of back and forth. Yeah, you're nodding at me, Rahul. You recognize that one? Yeah, great. And so thinking about when can you use deals, or when can you allow a favor, that can be really helpful, right? When can you do somebody a favor and just keep the second half of that in your pocket so that you can use it later, right? And so thinking about quid pro quo, absolutely, David, right? It is that piece of the exchange. So thinking about what kinds of situations at work can I use deals? If you hurry up and do your part of this group project quickly so that I can get on to my bit, then what can I do for you, right? If you do that bit quickly, I'll do this extra piece. If you could just get your bit done faster. So that's tactic number 3. So we've got reason, inspire, and deal. And the final one is silent allies. Sorry, Manny, a question. Eye for an eye, would that be the same? Yes, except eye for an eye always sounded like punishment, right? I'm going to come back with a kind of a punishment, but it is an equivalent exchange. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same value, but it's of equal importance or value to the people doing it, right? So it's not a deal if I say, you know, if you do all the laundry, I'll fold your t-shirts, right? That's not equivalent. So thinking about, but if you absolutely hate folding and I'm a brilliant folder, and when I fold them, there's going to be no need for ironing and they're going to be perfect, and those shirts are going to come out just like crisp, then that might be equivalent depending on what matters to the people involved. So again, that's where you've got to find the value, and that can be tricky and an interesting one to play around with. So perfect balance is hard to get. There's a lot of Latin going on. Is it Latin or Greek? Like, you guys are way beyond me with the old debates and the rhetoric here. I don't know that we're looking for perfect balance, but we're looking for an equivalence, absolutely, that matters there. So the final one then is silent allies, which is where so what I'm trying to do is convince you by convincing people you respect, or making you see that people you respect are already agreeing with me. It's definitely the Jenner approach, right? It's the whole Instagram approach. It's basically fashion, right? If I can get everybody else to wear their socks pulled up to their knees, you're going to, and you think they're stylish people, then you're going to start wearing your socks pulled up to your knees too. Or, you know, ankle socks with your Birkenstocks or whatever. America runs on, absolutely. Everybody else should be drinking the same coffee. The classic, has anybody, you know, joined a long queue? This is obviously pre-COVID. Joined a long queue outside a nightclub or a restaurant, got inside and there was almost nobody in there. You had that experience, right? That's because they want that. No, Dondre, not for you. They want that sense. Or so sometimes you go to a restaurant and they seat everybody in the window. There's this idea that if it's busy, that's the place to go. Again, we're working on that. Now, how do we use that in the workplace? It's where we say things like, all the other interns have agreed to this safety protocol, which makes you feel like, well, I better sign up too, right? All the other managers have agreed to let their team members have a holiday party. All the other managers have agreed to have espresso machines on their floor. We're the only floor that doesn't have an espresso machine. That doesn't seem fair, right? And so thinking that through. The only place this falls down is if the allies that you're trying to convince are people I don't respect. If I think all the other interns are idiots, right, then I don't want to be one of those. Then I'm automatically going to work against. So thinking through, how can I play this up? You know, everybody else all the other participants on this group project or in this collaboration have delivered their materials 3 hours ahead of the deadline. Am I going to get you to do your piece faster? So yes, Ashley, it is absolutely terrible when you get inside and it's empty and boring, and you can only hope that they let the queue in faster and let all those extra people get in so that we can have some more fun on the inside. So thinking those pieces through, right? Reason, what are their reasons? Inspiring them, how can you make them feel the way you want to feel? That deal or favor, right? The equivalent of the mints that come with your check that make you leave a bigger tip in the restaurant, and the silent allies, where are you pulling people together? So thinking about all those through, I want you to just think, what are the tactics that I can start using? So we talked in the beginning about all sorts of people you want to influence. So now in the chat box, I want you to just drop me a note. Which of those tactics might you start with? And I'm only saying start because I'm hoping that you're going to be more strategic. You're going to have a number of strategies, just like when you were a kid. Mom, you should get a dog because you said you wanted to go on more walks. Right? Reason. Mom, imagine when we can all have this fluffy dog here and he'll love us all and we'll love the dog, right? Deal. Mom, if you get the dog, we'll feed them. We'll do all the feeding. That's the deal. And the final one, silent allies, right? Manny's family and Luisa's family and Ashley's families, they all got COVID dogs. They all got dogs in the pandemic. You should let us get it. Right? So we knew how to do these as kids, and we have different tactics. We work multiple tactics to get persistent, to stay on the case, to keep that confidence, to get where we want to go. So what are the ones that you want to start with? Absolutely, Dondre, starting with that planning. Strategic with a deal, great. You want to start with deal favorite, Ashley. The art of the deal, well, I cannot say I've read the book. I don't know how good that is. We lower the price of the condo. Okay, brilliant. And then I'm going to take a break. Okay. And the reason aspect. So thinking about what are their reasons. Brilliant. So lots there to and we could keep going for ages, but I know Eric is telling me it's time to wrap it up. And I hope that you're going to talk more about those with each other and with Eric. Think about how you can use those right now and how you can use those in your work placements and where they're going to be showing up for you. Securing compassion, absolutely. Thinking through that think, feel, do. That'll be brilliant.
Awesome. Can we give Rachel a round of applause? That was really fantastic. Yeah, Ashley Ross, you hit the nail on the head. And Rachel has been so kind to just allocate a few minutes for Q&A. So based on her career and what she talked about this afternoon with us. So in order to keep from the 45 of us all trying to talk at once, please go ahead and raise your digital hand. I'll call on you and you can ask the question directly to Rachel. So Dondre, I see your hand is up first. So Dondre, the floor is yours.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for your presentation. I enjoyed it. I have 2 pages of notes here.
Good,
So
good.
My question is, okay, so going back to the scenario we had in Eric's class, we had a boss who was very tight-fisted with his money. He didn't want to buy the espresso machine. He said, if we get the espresso machine, everyone has to pay $1. How would we reason with somebody like that?
When you don't want to pay any money, you want the coffee to be free? Okay, so then thinking through, well, what are his reasons? What are the reasons what would be his reasons for giving you free coffee? And so starting from there, right? Everybody will spend more time at work. People will feel appreciated and there will be higher performance as a result. People will you can control how much coffee there is, maybe, right? So thinking through what are his reasons why he should pay. You can go the other way, which is all the pain, right? Does he really want to have to, it would be so much pain for him to have to monitor the money. Who would he put in charge of it? He would have to put somebody in charge of the petty cash and minding that. Now then we might have a security issue. How would he be sure that everybody had paid? Does he really want to police it? So you could start with the reasons why it's a bad idea too, and that might help get him towards the good stuff.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome question, Dondre. Moses, your hand was up next.
Yeah, so my question is, I want to know what would be the best practices when you're trying to use these techniques on employers, say like when you're going to an interview.
Right. So again, Moises, I think you start from the same place. What do you want them to think, feel, or do? So specifically in an interview, there's a couple of things. We can learn a lot from politicians. What are the key pieces of information you want them to know before you leave the room? So figuring out the things you need to know about me are. Now, telling people is cheap. So show me, don't tell me. Don't tell me that you are great at teamwork. Show me, give me an example, right? So I worked on this project where we were blah, 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 blah. Give me the details. So when you tell me the thing, it's easy for me to get bored listening. But when you show me and really flesh out those examples, that's what I want. And that's a big lesson for us in interviewing. The other piece is thinking about how you want them to feel about you and what you want them to think. So if you want them to think he hits all the criteria, you want them to feel confident in making the offer. So again, thinking that piece through is going to be important. And really, what are the reasons why they should employ you? So you're going to be looking through the job description or that role and seeing like, here's what they say they want. And then you're going to look through your own work history, volunteering, schooling, family commitments, and you're going to say, where can I show that I've got that? And then you're going to prepare those pieces of information so that you can knit that together, so that you can show them you're looking for somebody who's got real attention to detail. Here's an example that I have of where I've done that, and making sure you can have those pieces at your fingertips. The key piece here, Moises, exactly as we were discussing in this, is in your preparation, is being strategic. So it's very hard for us to transmit and compose at the same time, right? So it's easier for me to talk about this in the pieces that I had prepared for my presentation than it is now when I'm answering a question on the fly and it's kind of going in a lot of different, like it's not very direct here. I'm a bit sort of loosey-goosey, where I was much more direct in my presentation. So that's a piece you want to be prepared enough that you can tell those stories, you remember those good examples that fit the bill so that you're ready to tell them in the moment. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Rachel.
Awesome. Great question, Moses. Ashley Ross, your hand is next.
Thank you, Rachel, for coming to talk to us. I have lots of notes here. And my question is, in the levels of listening pyramid, you had selective and attentive. Can you give one example of each in a workplace?
Okay, so selective listening, I'm only listening to hear the bits that I'm interested in, right? So, or I'm only listening to hear the bits that reference me or my project. So we've all been in a Zoom meeting like this. And then they say something about the one, and you're like, okay, I'll make a note here. And then they go back to talking about Randy's project. You're like, right? That's selective listening. I'm only listening for the bits that reference Ashley's project. Attentive listening is when I'm actually listening to everything that's going on and I'm attending to it. And I'm attending to what you say, right? So I'm being very attentive. Active listening is where I'm actually trying to really understand that rather than just make a note of it. So attentive and active are the closest to each other, but there's a difference. So the active is I'm not just into what you say, but I'm paying attention to your tone of voice, your body language, your emotion, and also to what you're not saying, right? I'm really listening for, you know, and if you watch it with interviewers, you can see that going on a lot, where what's not getting said, right? Would you agree that blah, blah, blah? And I'll say 7 other things, but I don't ever agree, right? That's the piece that's not being said. And so active listening is really coming back to, can I just pick you up on that? Does that help?
Yes, it did.
Awesome. Great question, Ashley. We have about 5 more minutes with Rachel. If any more hands want to go up. I have a question for you, Rachel, as people think through others. One of the things we talked about in your workshop was like cultivating curiosity, and that being such an important part of influencing. But my question is, in the workplace, particularly, in a place like New York City, work is very fast paced. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of demands on your time and your energy. How do you cultivate curiosity in a high pressure, fast paced work environment?
That's a really interesting question. I think I cultivate it by just, so first of all, I've always been curious, right? Why are you doing that? What's going on? Is your name Yoel? Is it Yol? Like, how does he say that name? That I'm curious about that, right? So that's just, I have this natural, why would he come from that perspective? What's going on? So for some of us, we're just wired more curiously. We want to know about all the projects. And that can become very overwhelming at times, and you find yourself with too much on your plate. I think that in a fast-paced environment, it's about getting curious about the things that either you don't know, or the things that you're interested in that sort of connect to you, and where that could go. So see, Moses, this is exactly where I haven't prepared this piece. So it's hard for me to compose and transmit at the same time. Like, what do I think? I don't really know. I think that everybody enjoys other people's curiosity. And if you're curious about me, if you're curious about what I think, if you're going to actually listen to me, I like it. People like people listening to them and being curious and wondering about why they say things or why they do things. And so I think that that's a really engaging quality. So we don't overdo it. We don't get to the point where we neglect our own work. But I think that it is very influential. You know, if you just think about a really fun dinner or date that you've ever been on or night out with friends, like the quality that sets that apart from another night that wasn't quite so much fun is often, did you feel really heard? Did people really listen and engage? Were they wondering about why you were thinking the things you were, or what drove that behavior, and really getting into that? And when people listen in that way, we are funnier and we are more interesting and we tell better stories. And so knowing that you can just use that, like just where do you shine your light on other people, can really bring them out, and it can be very, very engaging. And so I think that that's the piece for me, is just about knowing you have a spotlight and where you choose to shine it matters. And I don't worry too much about, then if you find yourself chasing your tail, kind of stop for a while, pull back. But knowing that you can use it in that way that is just so engaging.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. That's really helpful. Ashley Ross, is that hand from earlier? Or do you have a new question?
It's a new question.
All right, let's make
She's a
this the
curious
last one.
girl, curious
Yes,
lady.
Love it.
So my question is, what is an appropriate amount of time to wait until you reintroduce a topic that was unsuccessful? And what should you change about your approach first, the second time around?
That is a great question. Unfortunately, the answer is I don't know. So it's going to be what's appropriate in the situation. Those researchers from Cornell, they found that if people have said no before, they're more likely to say yes the next time. So that's the first thing, which is don't give up. And then in terms of changing your approach, you have to really think through, what was it that didn't work the last time? So if they gave you reasons why it couldn't happen, can you come back? Have you been able to consider their reasons and find a workaround? If the situation has changed, have you gotten new information? And if your tactic just didn't work, is there a better tactic? Could you use deal this time? Could you use silent allies this time? So thinking a bit more broadly. So I would really reflect on what you've done, Ashley, and then think about how could I better my performance next time. But in terms of how soon to come back, that's going to be totally depend, because sometimes, you know, people are still furious. I can't believe you asked me for that. That's just so inappropriate. So you might need to leave it quite a bit longer than if you just get a, well, just not now, or I'm too busy. So there can be different ways to come back at it and different pace.
Awesome. Great questions. And this is the thing about the resources that Rachel just shared. I mean, think about like a group project that you do with your colleagues. When you have that one person who doesn't pull their weight, most of us probably say to that person, come on, like we need you to do this. We need you to get it done. Like it's due on this day. Like that's reason, right? And we just live in reason. We live in reason.
But they're my reasons. They're not their reasons, right? Exactly. I need you to get it done. Well, I don't really care about you, Rach. Right?
Exactly. And
I need you to get it done because I am, I'm going to be busy this weekend. Well, that's your problem.
Exactly. But then if you take another route, like, hey, I'll make you a deal. You do your PowerPoint like you said you would, and I'll do the animations and the graphics. Is that a deal? Yeah, I could agree to that. Or you use Inspire. Like, imagine how nice it will be once this is all done and complete. We can all celebrate together. This project is done. Using these different tactics, they really go a long way. Rachel, you're fabulous. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thanks for letting me come and hang out.
Yeah, guys, can we give her one more round of applause and we'll go ahead and conclude our class. And guys, have a good rest of the day, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rachel.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you,
you
Eric.
all.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Eric.
Thank you, Rachel. You are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Rachel, I think they loved you.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I felt like I was. It was a lot of information to get through in a short amount of time. But I do think that research out of Cornell around you're already more persuasive than you think you are is a really good one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I appreciate it. What are your plans for the holiday?
Well, I'm trying